And then many of you have gone into managed services. I find the term managed services quite difficult. And people say I'm a managed service provider, and I'm always thinking, well, what do you really do? Because it can mean so many different things. You could be a managed print provider. You could be a device as a service vendor. You could be offering managed security services, disaster recovery, backup, etc. But actually, in this trend, it doesn't matter. Because if you are providing managed services, what does that mean? That means you have a link into your customers. And so what is the trend that hackers have discovered this year? Major companies have now got very sophisticated security policies in place. They're getting harder to hack. So the best way to hack them is first to hack their managed service providers. And if you can sit inside the managed service provider, wait a few months, that doesn't just mean you can hack one company, you can hack all their companies. And it's any of you, it doesn't matter whether you're managing copiers or disaster recovery, most of you are managed service providers in one shape or form. You are the weakest link in the chain. And sometimes you might not have done anything wrong, but the tools you're using are vulnerable. ConnectWise was guilty, for example, of having a breach inside their system. So you may have done everything right, and you're still the weakest link in the chain. And then we're going to see a drive of ecosystems, where your customers are going to rack up and rack up and rack up the requirements of what you have to perform in order to be able to do business with them. And we're seeing that as customers have one bad experience, suddenly the requirements on their managed service providers goes up and up. It's a very lucrative business, but be very, very careful that you're not the one exposed in the press for having led to a big hack. And as I talk about software as a service, and I give a challenge for our next presenters on this stage, you'll all know that whether it's servers, storage, security, PCs, print, or software, all the vendors want you to sell subscriptions. Let's be honest, why do they want you to sell subscriptions? Because if you're a shareholder and your company is a subscription company, then you're more valuable. Adobe led this trend very successfully. Autotask has been very successful on this trend. Once you get customers locked into subscription, they tend to stay loyal. You don't need to worry about selling upgrades or the next version. That means you need less people in the countries or no people in the countries, because once the customers signed up, the annuity stream keeps coming. Everyone is on this trend very fast. Microsoft, Cisco, etc. are all moving down this path. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. For customers, it's a mixed blessing. They get predictable spend, that's convenient. On the other hand, they can't make the choice to skip a version to save money for a year or two before upgrading. They are forced to keep on the same journey, which is obviously one of the reasons why it's so attractive to the vendors. But there is a big problem in the industry. And when I was with a CEO of one of these software companies just a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me all about the shift to subscriptions. We're not going to sell software, we're going to sell subscriptions. And I said, well, and you do all the business through the channel, how are you going to do the billing? And honestly, the answer was, we haven't thought about that yet. The billing of subscriptions is incredibly complex. You all know as consumers that you hate your electricity provider or your telecom provider because you can't understand the bills and you always suspect you're being ripped off. That's what's now happening to our industry. Now, the distributors are working hard to bring cloud platforms together. Innovix, for example, we're using one from Also. Tech Data has Stream 1. Arrow has ArrowSphere. But still today, despite all the investment, they're not able to put together a billing solution that covers software as a service and infrastructure, for example. And you'll also know on the infrastructure deals, they're complicated. Pricing takes a long time for you to get the bid for the customer. It's very hard work. So we have created a mess. It was much easier to sell a $100,000 deal to a customer and collect the money than to sell lots of subscriptions on different platforms, on different systems, and collect the money every month, potentially $10 here, $20 here. It's a nightmare. And earlier on this year, AWS was discovered innocently to have been mischarging its customers. So even AWS in a direct model was unable to get its direct billing systems correct. And replicating through the channel is a complete nightmare. For the vendors who can put this together, the best billing systems, that will be key to success. But what we really need is a set of industry standards, a consortium, where if the tech industry is going to sell subscriptions, we all agree to a set of standards and we can all work through one set of platforms. Until we get there, I'm afraid you have a nightmare to deal with. But when you have a nightmare, there is an opportunity, because what you can also now do is go to your customers and say, let's do an audit of what you're spending on technology. Let's see if you're on the right pricing plans and if they're charging you correctly. Perhaps that audit can save them 10% a year just by sorting out their billing infrastructure. So selling pricing services is absolutely going to be a skill in demand over the next 3 years. Something that you can make a great deal of money from it. And just before I move into predictions, I thought I'd also talk to you about a trend in marketing. We've learned from the consumer world, through apps like TripAdvisor and Amazon reviews, the importance of customer reviews in terms of making buying decisions. Social media has used apps like TikTok and Instagram to promote consumer products. Our message from a marketing perspective today is, how can you get your customers to talk about you?